Hi, everybody. I'm Lawrence Ross. I'm the 2021 and 2020 chairman of the Northwest Chamber. Let's start today with our invocation and our pledge. Kathy Cummings, councilwoman of the village, and Nikki Floyd, mayor of Bethany, could you both come up, please, and show us the way?
How are you? It's good to see you. Welcome, everyone. Will you bow your heads as I pray? Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself and for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. I am asking that you would graciously grant us wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and rightness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives and joy in their tasks. I pray for the agenda set before us today. Please give an assurance of what pleases you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Oklahoma City. It is in your most blessed name I pray. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're pleased to be here today at the Embassy Suites Northwest. They have completed an impressive renovation, and we're happy to have the team from Embassy Suites and Champion Hotels with us today. They'd be happy to take you on a tour at the end of our event if you want to. Speaking for our presenting sponsor, Tinker Federal Credit Union. Wow, I really messed that up. Let me try again. Tinker Federal Credit Union. So what happens when you stay inside for a year? Is Dave Willis, President and COO. Dave, do you have some words for us, sir?
I will be really, really brief because nobody came here to hear me and nobody really cares what I got to say, so that's okay. I got a couple notes here from our marketing department because they always want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So first of all, we want to welcome you guys to this. It's been a year plus of not getting to come to this. We were sitting here just talking about the fact that we missed this event last year. And we've been a proud presenting sponsor of this for at least the last 15 or so years. And so we're glad to be part of that. We are also quite happy this year. We are celebrating our 75th anniversary. I know I don't look 75, but we are very happy about our birthday and having been around for 75 years. We're excited to be part of this event, and we love that we get to come out and hear our legislators and everybody to speak and talk to us about what's going on here at our Capitol. Like everybody else, we're very interested in what's going on at our Capitol, and it's hard to watch what's going on at the national Capitol, but we're also interested in what's going on there. Most of our members are also constituents, and we have a lot of the same interests, so we want to see what goes on here to continue in a positive way. So, thanks for being here today. Thanks for letting us be part of this sponsorship, and I think I'm done.
Well, Dave, you took all of my thank yous in 75 years in business. You took my thunder, so I'll move on from there. In addition to our program, there are other people I'd like to recognize today. A big thank you to Mayor Jim Mickley and the City of 4 Acres for sponsoring 2 tables and bringing their City Council, fire, and police leadership. Oklahoma County District 2, Michael Taylor is here representing Brian Mon. Bethany Mayor Nikki Lloyd and Councilperson Kathy Larson. The Village Councilperson Kathy Cummings. Francis Tuttle Technology Center Superintendent Dr. Michelle Keelan. Estela Hernandez, representing U.S. Senator James Langford. Chelsea Barnett and Mealy Deemy, representing County Commissioner Kevin Calvey. I also want to thank Gary Mercer, Craig Foster, and Priscilla Cood, previous chairs that had to get up here and do all this, for their continued involvement and engagement with our community and with the Chamber. Speaking of that, I want to thank our hardworking volunteers, ambassadors, and board members, and especially our advocacy chair, Lori Callahan, for putting her efforts into this event. Now, you should have had an opportunity to fill out the squares and turn in your cards, because we're ready to get this show on the road. Could I ask our legislators to come forward and take their positions on the dais? So I have one other thank you, and that's basically everybody that I didn't name, because all of you are simply here because you care about what's happening in our community, both on a governmental level and just on a smaller level of building relationships and figuring out other points of view. And so thank you for that. Our moderator today is Scott Mitchell. Scott is a professional media, litigation, and government affairs consultant with nearly 34 years of experience. You may have seen him on television. He also hosts Your Vote Counts, Sundays at 7:50 a.m., and Hot Seat at 7:50 a.m. Saturday on News 9. Mr. Mitchell, are you ready, sir?
This is to be passed along with this half of it. It's been treated with microban. If you're wondering why it's because it's been treated with the microban, so that it's supposed to ward off all that.
Thank you, ladies. You got to be quick around here. I noticed on Pledge of Allegiance, you got to go fast. So I do want you to know that Jill doesn't know this, but today's forum is brought to you by Prevagen. Both Billy, Jim, and I are going to start taking it because, and of course, our other sponsor will be Colin Walkie's book. And so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. All right, it's my understanding, if I'm correct on this, Jill, that I am supposed to, here it comes. Also, our other sponsor today, Right Speech by Colin R. Walkie. Now, the reason I want you to know about this is because my first job in journalism was because Colin Walkie's uncle hired me. And Billy Rodeley and Jim Palmer did not. Because Brian Walkie went faster. All right, it is my understanding, Jill, where did Jill go? Oh, there she is. That we are ready for brief introductions, and we get 3 minutes, our lawmakers. By last count, 6 of those who are veterans of Sunday morning's most watched television program in Oklahoma, Flashpoint. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So we have 3 minutes for introductions, and we'll start with the questions. Senator Kurt has asked, do you want to go first, or do you really want me to go where you want? Senator Julia Kurt, thank you for being here.
Is it on? All right, good day. Good afternoon. Julia Kurt, I was elected in 2018, and pleased to be here. Just a couple things. I think they wanted just a little overview of the session in terms of highlights. I wanted to give one very positive highlight, which is the work on mental health in our state and its effects on education, criminal justice, and basically every aspect of our health and well-being. Our legislature did start a new mental health caucus this year. I was proud to get to help start that, and it's bicameral, bipartisan, and really focused around the most impactful things we can do for mental health in our state. So I'm very pleased about that. In terms of concerns, definitely concerned about the next wave of COVID that looks like it's coming this way, and I'm really hoping we've learned some lessons from last year about the economic and health costs of not addressing that as well as we can. So hopefully we've learned some lessons and can apply them now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This is my first time here, and recently elected to fill Congresswoman Stephanie Bice's seat when she was elected. She vacated her seat in District 22, so I was elected in a special election and sworn in April 14th, right in the middle of deadline week. And so it was tons of fun and learning a lot on the fly. And what was amazing is just to see how much support surrounds everyone at the Capitol. You're not left alone to just fall on your face, but I was surrounded by so many people who came alongside me to help educate me and get me up to speed on how to read bills and what it looks like and feels like on the floor and how to vote and things like that. There was a lot to learn in a short amount of time, but learned a lot. It was a positive experience. I'm excited about this opportunity to represent District 22 and be a voice for the people. I really see that as my primary responsibility is to fight for the freedom of all people, whether you're man, woman, Democrat, Republican. It's truly about freedom, and I feel like now in this day and age, then we're seeing our freedoms challenged like never before, and so it's more important than ever to truly take a stand for freedom. And so it's a privilege to do that in the Oklahoma Senate. I was this last session. I don't have a full session to refer back to, but for the short time I was in there, I got to be part of a lot of amazing things. And I believe that probably one of the highlights, I was sitting next to Miss Estela Hernandez and chatting about school opportunities and from my personal experience with our child, we adopted our oldest, and we've struggled to find the right fit for her because of the trauma associated with her past. And so school choice for us is a very personal, real thing. And so it was an honor and a privilege to be able to be a part of that, to offer more families and parents the opportunity to choose where their child will find that best fit and best be educated. And so it was an honor to be a part of that. Looking forward, my focus is really on DHS. It's on families. It's on how can we work on the core family unit, because I believe our society is built on families. And as the family goes, so goes the state, so goes the nation. And so I want to really focus on families and how to strengthen that core unit of our society. So I appreciate all you guys, all your support. Thank you.
So I'm Colin Walkie. I represent Northwest Oklahoma City from Northwest Expressway down to about 23rd Street, Penn Avenue over to MacArthur. And unfortunately, Senator Treat isn't here, but I'm sure some of his constituents are. So I want to give you a highlight and a to-do. So this past session, Oklahoma had the opportunity to lead the nation in data privacy. A lot of you probably don't know what data privacy means, but what it does mean is this. Every single time you go on the internet, whether you're looking for erectile dysfunction pills or discussing serious issues like sexual assault, that information is being bought and sold on the open market to companies for profit and to countries that can exploit us by use of that data. So I urge everyone to contact Senator Treat and ask him to hear HB 1602. It passed out of the House of Representatives by 85 to 11. It died in the Senate because of one committee chairperson. So we all have the opportunity to lead the nation in data privacy. There's only 3 states that have passed data privacy regulation. None of them have laws as strict as we do. So if you want to protect your freedom of choice, your freedom from manipulation, data privacy is where to start, and I hope we can all get behind that issue. So that's my highlight from this session.
He's a very passionate speaker, so I'm checking myself before I begin. My name is Carrie Hicks. I represent Senate District 40, which you are now in the heart of. So welcome to Senate District 40. It basically runs from Britton south to 23rd Street, and then from about Western over to MacArthur. And it'll look a little different, about 50% different to be exact, in 2022. But I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I was a spectator at one point, so now it's nice. I think this is the second time that I've been on this side of the table. Some highlights from this past legislative session. I'm a co-chair of the Legislative Diabetes Caucus. Our son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 17 months old. He's 7 now and thriving, and actually attends the public school just to the north here of Embassy Suites at D.D. Kirkland and Putnam City Schools. And it was a really challenging time for our family. Obviously, you have to learn how to relearn to take care of your young child. Insulin cost, insurance, everything that goes with managing a chronic illness continues to be a real passion in ways that the state can be involved at mitigating those costs for families. We were able to pass a bipartisan bill this year that would cap the out-of-pocket or copay cost for insulin. It's the start of some really hard work and some tough conversations that we need to have about insurance, PBMs, pharmacies, manufacturers. There are a lot of moving pieces to this conversation, but I'm really, really thankful that we were able to accomplish that meaningful legislation this year. Some things that I'm continuing to work towards and on. As a former public school teacher, I definitely feel as though we are headed for another steep cliff. Our teacher shortage only continues to be elevated. We've had our retirement triple this year. We led the country in a national shortage of teachers and qualified individuals to instruct the next generation of Oklahomans. And right now, we are looking at an even bigger crisis than when I ran. So I'm encouraged by the candidates that I have seen in our higher education institutions, but I am very sincere in my pursuit to really figure out how we can make sure that we are attracting, retaining, and best preparing educators to be successful in our classroom. And that also involves some really hard conversations about what is happening in our classrooms. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I have not missed one of these since I've been elected, except for last year, as we talked about. My name is John Eccles. I represent House District 90. I serve in a position in the House called Majority Floor Leader. I've served in that position now for 5 years. Next year will be my 6th. I'll be the longest serving, after next year, I'll be the longest serving Majority Floor Leader in state history, even pre-term limits. So that lets you know I'm in a job that most people don't survive in very long. So do with that what you will. The job of Majority Floor Leader determines I determine committee assignments, which bills go to the floor, which bills go to which committee, and by far the most controversial thing I do is give office assignments and parking spots. They will cut me over those before bills. And so if I were to give an update on last year's legislative session, I think it was a phenomenal year. So I'm going to give some highlights. Highest education budget in the history of the state of Oklahoma, which included, by the way, the Redbud Fund, which helps the lowest 50% in property taxes districts. Very helpful to the schools in my district, at least 3 of the 5 of them. We had a great budget with the highest savings account we've had in the history of the state of Oklahoma. Was able to cut the corporate income tax, cut the personal income tax, restore refundability of the earned-in tax credit. So everyone in the state of Oklahoma is going to have a lower tax burden next year. And on top of that, we were able to do some good stuff in medical marijuana regulation. There are two things I think we missed last year. We missed more than 2 things, but 2 I'm going to highlight, and 1 I'm going to work on, something I'm going to work on next year. 1 is I think we really missed an opportunity to make a wholesale change in how we regulate the medical marijuana in the state of Oklahoma. I am pro-medical marijuana. I'm actually anti-recreational, but I'm very pro-medical. But if you've been around, we have a real problem with the black market still because we are not regulating it well. There was a bill the House passed unanimously to send it to Able. I wish it would have made it all the way to the governor. It didn't. That's a real miss. The other miss is we have not done enough to fix our driver's license issues. We offered DPS a blank check to fix it. First time as a conservative legislator, looked at an agency and said, how much money do you want? We're going to give it to you. What they did is create the mega centers, which are helpful, very helpful, but those are 2 real problems. And then one of the things you're going to see me work on, I worked heavily on education reforms last year. Next year I'll be working heavily on higher education reforms, making it easier for our students to do concurrent enrollment and compete with other states. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tammy West, and I just told Representative Eccles he stole almost all of my stuff. So I may repeat a little bit, and hopefully that will be okay with you guys. I represent Northwest Oklahoma City, and like Senator Hicks, for a long time I was sitting at the table and listening, and came into office in 2016, was part of that class along with Representative Walkie, that we came in and made some really tough decisions that I don't think we ever dreamed we would be facing. But when I walked into office, we had, I think, our third year of almost $1 billion shortfall. We made some really hard decisions in 2016 that I think we are now reaping the benefits of. We have stabilized the budget, and as Representative Eccles spoke about, we have reinvested in the state of Oklahoma. We have to continue to do that. We have to continue to do it wisely. It is sometimes a downfall to have too much and not use it well. We've got an unprecedented opportunity to make sure we're putting money where it needs to go. I am the vice chair of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, the AB Budgeting Committee arm of that. We did make unprecedented investments in that with regards to transportation of those who are in a mental health crisis. And we're also working on a 988 number for those who are having a mental health crisis. We'll be able to divert them and get immediate help versus channeling through the 911 system. So hopefully that will help with our public safety and also getting help where it is needed. The other area that, yes, we're always going to have work to do, as does the entire nation with regards to education. But we've made some unprecedented investments there also. Since I have been in office, we have invested almost $1 billion back into our public schools. Something that, as a member of the Putnam City School Board before I stepped into this position, it is vital that we continue to reinvest, but that we also make sure that parents always have good options for their children. We want all of our schools to be able to offer the best, regardless of where they're located and where that zip code is. That should be the goal, and I think that we're continuing to strive for that, in addition to making sure parents have the options that they need. So we've kind of chartered some new waters in that area with regards to the opportunities that we're providing there. I serve as the majority whip. This is my first year in that position. It's my fifth year in office, my first year as the majority whip. I have learned that the most important part of my job is the whip, and it's a position appointed by the Speaker of the House, is that I am trusted with people's opinions. I guard them. I take them, I guard them, and then we use those when we're putting votes or measures on the board for a vote. It has been a tremendous honor to serve in that capacity, and I look forward to further time doing that.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Maury Turner. I am the representative for House District 88. My pronouns are they and them. I just say that, so if you ever refer to me and I'm not there, they, them. Those are the ones we use. I was elected in November of 2020, so this was my first complete session on the opposite side of the desk. Before that, I had worked in and around the Capitol for about 5 years before. I did a little organizing with the American Civil Liberties Union, before that with the Council of American Islamic Relations, and before that with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Civil rights and liberties is something that is very near and dear to my heart because it's a part of every identity that I hold. My reflections on this last session, like I said, I was a freshman. I wrote, I think, maybe 14 bills. None of them got hearings in committees. So I got to be really entrenched in actually learning the process of what it looks like to whip votes and really understand what that process of talking with people and that one-on-one connection that you make with people to be able to pass bills and really kind of hear what brings people to the work. I think that's what helps everybody do this work in an equitable manner. Outside of that, I'm the first Muslim that Oklahoma has elected to the Oklahoma legislature. I am the first non-binary person that has been elected to a state-level position in the U.S. And some of the policies that I brought forth were, so some of the things that go on here in Oklahoma are, so right now, if you are held in a county detention center, facility, jail, anything like that, we have a lot of people who will miss court dates in another county and then will receive a warrant for that. So I wrote a piece of legislation like that. Senator Hicks did as well, with I believe Representative Strom. Really, really powerful legislation that a lot of people are interested in and working on, because if you are currently detained by another facility, there's no way you should have to pay a fine for missing a court date someplace else. So things like that, working on the standardizing, the hiring practices for law enforcement officers. It looks very different in different municipalities, and so making sure that we have something so that way if people want to transfer to another law enforcement agency in another county or something like that, then you have everything you need and you have to jump through any extra hoops or anything like that. Let's see. And I think one of the big things about that, and is that the end of time? Okay, perfect. Well, we'll talk about more when we get into questions. Okay.
Hello, thanks for having us. I'm Eric Roberts. I'm District 83, which is Southwest Edmond, Northwest Oklahoma City, Village, and Nichols Hills. And my district will look quite a bit different in 2022, like Carrie's. But I just recently was elected. I'm in the same class as Maury, and it's quite a steep learning curve coming in. They say it's drinking from a fire hose, but I think it's dump truck loads. They come and dump a big bunch of information on you. You absorb it all, then here comes another truck. But I was elected on November 3rd. I was sworn in on November 11th. The term started on November 18th. My first round of bills had to be in by the second week of December. And I didn't get my office or my LA till the end of December. So it was a lot of, which is akin to all these other people that are up here, because I got to, I had a lot of questions. And so no matter who I asked, they always stopped and took time to explain to me what I needed to do. But I come from the business world. I'm in commercial development, so business is very near and dear to my heart. And but some of the highlights that everybody else has talked about, but I'm going to talk about them again. But on the education front, we changed the funding formula to make it a little more equitable, so there's not as many ghost students in the system. We got open transfer done, the Redbud funding like Eccles had talked about, and we passed the civics test. We are trying to get the driver's license glut back done by opening up the mega centers, which open up, I believe, on the one here in Oklahoma City opens up on the 26th. A lot of calls to my office on driver's licenses. And then taxes, we reduced the personal and corporate income tax and the earned income tax credit. And the budget, when I was campaigning, on a $1.2 billion shortfall. And that's what I was telling everybody on the doorstep, is we're looking at a 1.2 between COVID and oil. And now, after our first session, we have about $1 billion surplus. And so that was akin to all the good work that the previous legislatures have put in place. So we basically have replaced all the cuts from the COVID budget, replaced all those cuts. We added an extra $34 million into education, which triggered 1017, which is the smaller class size through K through 3. So those classes will get more one-on-one, and Medicaid expansion, funded that, and that is about it, I think. So I guess we'll just start with questions.
I want to pick and pair some of these questions a little bit. We're going to get everybody on this one because my dear friend, Leader Eccles, mentioned driver's licenses and marijuana. I can't think of anything that goes better together. My wife, everybody was in COVIDed up for a long time, and we're way out eastern Oklahoma County, and my wife put on my Apple Play, she kept putting the same song on there. It was called "How Can I Miss You If You Won't Go Away?" So I told her I'm going to go to the tag agency, and it was a great 2 weeks for her. By the way, Senator Hicks, your husband just sent me a text message to say that Spencer Hicks in no way had anything to do with any of the jokes that I'm telling here today. Bad for his reputation. Let's start with interim. There's been some interest in interim studies. Why don't we start with interim? Representative Turner, if you'll start. What do you see in interim studies you like? What do you think we should be getting done in 2022?
Thank you for that question. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I haven't. The only interim study that I've really been paying attention to is the interim study that really kind of, I guess, maybe give us a little bit more insight on Senate Bill 2, which makes sure that trans girls, trans students can't play the sports that they are supposed to be able to play. So other than that, I've been in my district making sure we're having community conversations about the things that are going on that affect us in the city and at a state level. But so that is the interim study that I've been paying attention to a lot, because I think to tell a student that you can present, you can be who you are, right, throughout the day, right, from all hours of the day except for these couple of hours at the end of the day where you get to play sports with people, where you get to practice sports, where you get to learn leadership skills, where you get to build skills and really understand what team building is, what critical thinking is. That's the time where you cannot be yourself. That is what Senate Bill 2 does. And so to be able to really kind of watch how it came through the House and through the Senate, and really kind of watch what this interim study is supposed to do, and the information that will come around it is the number one thing that I've been paying attention to. Other than that, we've been talking in our district about what's going on and how we create a legislative packet that spans the municipal district and the municipality as well as the state when it comes to police funding, and how we make an equitable playing field there. So thank you for the question. I'm sorry I didn't have a better answer for you.
Okay. As far as interim studies go, I'm still learning the process, so I'm really only involved in one interim study right now, and that is on the theft of catalytic converters. Believe it or not, there's been a rash of that going on, and actually this came as a constituent request. He owns a construction company, and his yard got broken into, and all his trucks got the converters stole. And it wasn't so much the $10,000 it took to repair the trucks, it was all the downtime that he lost, not being able to have those trucks on the road. And if you heard in the news the other day, there's a big rash going on in Edmond of converters. So I am working with Representative Ross Ford on that and looking into how we can try to curb that, because there's already legislation on the books that says you can't sell them to scrap yards, but they're being stolen and sold anyway. So we just need to look into how we can tighten that up. I know it's not very big, it's not very pretty, but it's something that can affect each and every one of you at any time.
Well, I've only got one interim study that is actually going to, I think, make it across the line, but Laurie said that it was kind of interesting to know that I started looking at 4. And she said, well, go ahead and explain the process of what happened from going from 4 to 1. And the best thing happened, and that is that people got around the table and over a cup of coffee solved the problem before we had to get legislative things in process. That whether we're running legislation on the floor or doing studies, the best solution is to bring the people who are involved together and they come up with a solution. So I was initially looking at doing studies and had formed them with regards to victims' compensation, and when victims of crime, making sure they have been fairly compensated from the Victims' Compensation Fund. Everybody from the district attorney's panel, all of those people came to the table. They're working on that issue together now. Inhalers with regards to asthma for our public school system. This has been an issue kind of similar with insulin with children who have critical health needs. We now are looking at a public-private partnership to make sure that they're being provided free of charge at our public schools so that children who have asthmatic needs have those needs met and they're readily available. Then also with our adult living centers that were closed due to COVID, they saved the state a tremendous amount of money. It's kind of the adult daycare is what they actually are, but it saves families. It keeps people at home longer. They were shut down due to COVID, and the funding got redirected. I was going to do a study making sure that got fixed, and as we developed the study, we all met in a room, got together, and got that straightened out. The study that is going forward deals with the aerospace industry. We have diversified the economics of the state tremendously. It is one of the reasons that we are experiencing budget surpluses, not shortfalls. Aerospace is leading in that area. Our career tech system has done a tremendous job making sure our aerospace engineering is at a level that it needs to be. My study will deal with our higher education system and making sure our engineers that are graduating in these areas are not only ready to go for the companies like Boeing that have come into Oklahoma, so that their engineering is technically exactly what it needs to be for the job that they're going to need to be filling, but also for our national defense. So this was a request bill with regards to aerospace engineering in our higher education system.
Thank you. So I will go, I just have one I want to talk about. I may or may not, same way, I may or may not do it. It's dealing with higher education. It's how do we make Oklahoma a top 10 state for the number of college graduates. And talking with some of my local college presidents, one of the things I want to do, our state is non-competitive when it comes to how the opportunities we give our students for taking concurrent enrollment courses. We put artificial barriers on our students that other states do not, and I'm going to give you an example. In the state of Texas, we test students every year. We do standardized testing. In the state of Texas, about around a decade ago, they passed a law that said if a student passes within a certain portion on the test, they can take concurrent enrollment courses as young as a freshman for those subjects that they test. In Oklahoma, if you want to do it under the age of a junior, you need the permission of the entire State Board of Regents. It's an artificial barrier that doesn't make sense. We also put a cap on how many total concurrent enrollment states, or how many total concurrent enrollment and high school credits you can take if you're a junior or senior. I want to really sugarcoat my position. These are nonsensical. They make absolutely no sense. And as I talk to local college presidents, we're getting great ability to push that forward. So what I think we're going to try to do through the study is pass some student-centered legislation that would have the ability to enroll, as we talk about new job applicants. Senator Hicks brought up a great point with teachers. She's spot on. So we need to graduate more. In addition to retaining, I'm in the healthcare field. We have a national shortage of nurses. I don't think there's anything that is more short than nurses. We need to both graduate more and retain more inside. So let's get rid of artificial barriers and let's create a student-centered focus. And if I haven't touched on some nerves, let me touch on some nerves. Hopefully in the last two, career tech and higher ed need to do a better job talking. When we have the same course in a career tech and in a higher education institution, and for some reason we don't give credit in both places, and I hear it's because of accreditation. With all due respect, 2 of the states that touched us have figured it out, and we're going to figure it out for students. We're going to figure it out. And number 2, I think I haven't made enough people mad, so I'm really going to try with this one. I think we need to let higher education institutions get more involved in charter schools. I think they know what it takes to succeed in higher education, and I think we need to get them more involved in our common education system. So those are the types of things we're going to be looking at with a goal, a very aggressive goal, of increasing the number of college graduates in the state of Oklahoma.
So I requested 4 this year, which is like an all-time low for me. So I was being very, very measured. And just as Representative West, I think we're going to be able to get 3 of those got approved. I think we're going to be able to get some solutions off of one that are not going to be, it's not going to be needed to be studied in a public setting. But I did kind of want to touch on it. It's something that we've been working on for 3 years. It's called an ICF, which is an intermediate care facility. Specifically facilities that serve a population of 16 or less. So these facilities basically serve as a home, a care setting for young adults with disabilities. And so we have probably 3 times as many regulations on these facilities as any other state. I think more than 10 additional up and above what the federal regulations require. And so as you can imagine, I think that there are some opportunities here to really review that, to make sure that obviously our vulnerable populations are being taken care of, but really enabling more facilities to open to meet the need. Being in the classroom recently, I know that we are going to have a significant increase in the population, and we need that choice for families. One of my constituents got me involved in this issue. He lives right here obviously in Oklahoma City, but the closest facility for his daughter is in Moore. And so I've been partnering with Senator Weaver on this issue, and I do think that hopefully, if we can get everybody at the table, that we can actually figure out how we can move forward with that issue. One of the interim studies that I'm actually really proud of that we're going to be working with the Department of Corrections is to study providing nursing accommodations for our inmates. It is no secret that we have the highest ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, of any other state in the country. I think that's probably directly linked to the fact that we incarcerate women higher than most states in the country as well. So really looking at kind of the humanity side of what can be done to give that child the best start. We know that it greatly reduces recidivism if that inmate has a reason to get out and do better and be better for their community. And so we want to start to talk about what are some meaningful ways that we can really support those transitions.
So I have one interim study, and I'll tell you how it came about, because this is a reminder to contact Senator Treat about HB 1602. Because data privacy isn't a partisan issue. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, you ought to care about your privacy and your freedoms, right? And as a result of that, my interim study this year is being run with a Republican named Representative Randy Randleman. And that came about because they realized that, you know what, there is a lot of room where Democrats and Republicans can come together on certain issues. And so Representative Randleman and myself are going to be looking at how we can utilize diversion programs for mental health individuals who are experiencing mental health issues during an arrest and those sorts of things. So how could we potentially implement or utilize expanded Medicaid here in this state to assist with mental health issues in the county jails, those sorts of things, and those types of diversion programs. And I think it's important to note that this is a bipartisan interim study, just like what Senator Hicks said with working with Senator Weaver. We do work across the aisle in the state of Oklahoma, and I think that that's something that we ought to be proud of in this room. And it's something that we ought to acknowledge. Yeah, absolutely. Because if we're going to address mental health, if we're serious about that, that is not a one-sided issue, and everybody has to be at the table. So keep working and keep voicing your concerns to your representatives and your legislators, and let them know we want you working together on serious issues like mental health.
So that was 1602. Yes. And you would recommend they contact Tree? Okay, just to make sure that was clear. Yeah.
You can do it too.
So I have one interim study that, again, is close to me personally. We adopted our oldest out of DHS. She came into our custody when she was 3 years old. We adopted her when she was 5. What we experienced in that 2-year period was what seemed relentless, but the bio mom, bio dad both eventually got involved, and they were given certain requirements by the judge, by the court, and we would set another date for 3 months out. We would meet 3 months later. Those requirements had not even been attempted, but another 3 months was extended, and we would meet 3 months later, and nothing had been done, but 3 months more were given, and this continued for 2 years. During those 3-month periods, our daughter, she became our daughter, she was obviously granted visitation to return back to the source of trauma on a weekly basis. And then when she'd come back to us, completely dysregulated, wetting the bed, gorging food, pulling out her hair, trying to deal with the pain of being re-exposed to trauma. And then come back, we get her settled down. About the time she gets normal, let's go back for visitation again for 2 years. And so this, we saw firsthand, felt like it was unnecessary. In the end, neither mom nor dad did anything the court required, and they eventually removed the rights. They relinquished the rights. And so since then, we've heard from family after family who are experiencing the same thing. And so my interim study wants to take a look at possibly establishing a deadline where a parent, the bio parents, we believe in reunification if at all possible. But what we're seeing is a pattern where children are re-exposed to trauma. Things are being drug out. They're not able to have a forever home in a settled environment where they can grow and begin to flourish because they're in this period of flux and instability. And so I want to look at that. I want to look at see what would be a reasonable deadline for bio parents to listen to the orders of the court and to be making steps in order to change to get their children back. And if they're serious about it, I believe they'll take the action steps. If they're not, we need to do what's in the best interest of the children to get them into a stable environment. So that's what I'm going to be looking at. I'm excited about that. I've got a lot of interest from other parties. So yeah, it's important to me.
All right, I'm working on 2 projects that are not going to be over with one hearing, but I'm glad that interim studies are pending. One is related to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in our state and the transition for those folks from common education to the rest of their life. There's a time period for individuals with disabilities that they are able to receive transition services, which is a federally funded goes through our Department of Rehabilitation Services, and it's kind of this intersection of services. So someone might be receiving career counseling, they might be receiving assessments for what they might be able to do in the future. There's some real challenges for families during that time period, especially if they have someone who has higher needs, higher support needs, as to what's going to happen next. We also, as you know, have a long waiting list for our developmentally disabled services, our DDS services. So right now that is causing an extra challenge because for many families, when their loved one graduates, they have to quit work. So we usually have one member of the family quitting work to stay home. And lots of Oklahomans not getting the opportunity to reach their full potential. So we're going to look specifically at how long individuals in transition are in school, what kinds of services they're reaching and receiving, and then that intersection of state services to make sure we're being efficient and serving families and individuals well. So if you have issues around that, come talk to me because I've been trying to gather as much information as possible. The other is suicide prevention. So our adolescent suicide prevention numbers were already really bad. We already had a very big problem with our adolescents attempting suicide or dying by suicide in our state. COVID has made it significantly worse. I just came to a meeting in this room a couple of weeks ago that Integris held as a crisis meeting because they have had 117% increase in adolescents visiting their network with either suicide ideations or having dangerous side effects from a suicide attempt. So it's a crisis. We already should have been addressing it more, but this is a reason to elevate it. There are billions of dollars coming into our state from our American Rescue Plan, so we need to make sure we're being strategic in how we're approaching prevention. And, providers are in the room, educators are in the room. Every adult and child in our state can have an impact to prevent suicide, and we all need to know that it's a challenge and that our kids are really facing a hard time that's been elevated by COVID. So that's what the study's going to be, and you can help too.
Representative Roberts, your story about the catalytic converters. There's a guy out front in a University of Texas car selling them out of the back. And wants to remind you, nobody follows the rules in the Southeast Conference. Okay. I saw Stella Hernandez. Is she still here? Hi, Stella. There's nothing going on at the State Board of Education, is there? What's a bigger challenge, Western Heights Board or Trent Smith? Is Eccles laughing at that one? Okay, so let me just start. Education, and Senator Curt, I'd like to start on that. There are a lot of interest, a lot of questions here. Can't get to all of them, so let me just do a potpourri, all right? What Estella is having to do right now, mask mandates. Leader Eccles explained this morning, you have to wait till Sunday morning to see his answer on television, about what's happening with mask mandates and schools. There is a legal definition on that. There's also can't mandate inoculations and Western Heights. There's all kinds of things y'all are dealing with over there. So, and also a loft discussion of a loft audit. And for people who don't know what loft is, Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency, or as they say at TSET, the devil. That's a good one, by the way. Spencer wrote that one. Also, spending on COVID funds. So the Legislative Office of Fiscal Transparency is like the GAO, John, would you say it? A Congressional Budget Office. All right, so let's start with education. Biggest challenges you see from audits to school reopening. There is no bigger issue in the media right now than to say these three words, back to school. And there's a parent and a teacher. And also this, they got this thing up in northeast Oklahoma. It's not an airline, but it's called Delta. And Delta, if you've looked at the New York Times map, I don't know if there's plexiglass between us and Arkansas and Missouri, but sooner or later it's going to get real hot. Monday night on the Oklahoma Health Watch, we had a doctor from Grove, Oklahoma. Guess what they ain't got in Grove, Oklahoma? Beds. Guess what they ain't got in northeast Oklahoma? Ventilators. Oh, my 20-year-old this week just says, hey, Dad, can I go to Branson this week? Yeah, it's right in the middle. I'm just sorry. Spencer wrote that one too. All right. So let's start with Senator Curt. Biggest challenges in education. I think, weren't you a no on this loft audit, something along those lines here recently? So take it away. Everybody just work the way down. Whatever you want to pick on education, please speak to it.
Well, I'm just going to start with what I'm hearing from parents and educators and principals is they're deeply concerned because legislation that passed last year removed local control for decision-making around some of our mitigation efforts, some of the most effective ways to keep kids safe. And so because of legislation that was passed, schools don't have the option of requiring students to wear masks. And that is something that at a local level, last year we gave that control to those local school boards to keep kids safe as they knew best, as we already count on them to keep them safe in many, many other ways. But that has been removed from them. And I know for my 10-year-old and my 8th grader, I'm concerned about their well-being. My 10-year-old can't get vaccinated yet. Luckily, my 14-year-old is. So I'm hearing lots from constituents about that. If our governor chooses to make an emergency declaration, that does return some local control. So I'm hoping that we're able to give that option to our school boards who've taken on a huge, huge burden of responsibility in decision-making over the last year. And I'm very appreciative to them for making those hard decisions. The other thing I wanted to mention just was about budgets, and I do want to mention that in the budget increases for education this year, I was very glad to see those. Unfortunately, the corporate and income tax cuts then removed $139 million from the education budget. So while we saw increases almost $200 million, turned around and we cut money straight out of the 1017 fund. So I feel like we're a little bit on a hamster wheel with this. When we make decisions, they affect the entire comprehensive view of our budget. And so I'm concerned that we're now adding mandates, but the budget hasn't been increased sufficiently to cover that.
Thank you. I do believe the masks mandate and the vaccine mandate are probably the most contentious, hotly debated topics regarding education right now. Obviously, the question is, will we get back to the classroom this coming year with the looming Delta variant, on our northeastern side of the state? What does it look like? Are we able to get seats in the chairs, or will we be doing virtual, or what are their options? And so in the middle of this conversation, the thing that's a priority for me is choice, is for parents to be able to choose what their children. whether it's mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine, and in the end, where they ultimately send their children to be educated, in what environment they're sending their children to. And so that's the priority for me in this whole discussion, is that parents ultimately have the decision-making ability, the actual choice to send their children where they believe is safest and where they'll get the best education.
So we've already passed legislation pertaining to masks and vaccines. So, and while I do disagree with that, and I think that it ought to be a local control issue, listen to the Democrat talking about small government. But here's my next big issue that's important for education next session that I plan on running legislation on. We all know that mental health for our children is really important. I think we all experienced that this past year when our children were locked up at home and couldn't go out and socialize and visit with their friends. And there are software companies out there right now that are running mental health programs for their children. So you're a 6th or 7th or 8th grader, and you're sitting there in your classroom, and you have your laptop open so everybody else in class can see it too because their laptops are open. And they ask you questions like, do your parents fight? Do your parents go to church? Do you have a crush on someone? Is that a boy or is that a girl? These types of questions that are sometimes being asked without parental consent in the first place. And to make matters worse, it's not protected by FERPA and it's not protected by HIPAA because of the way the data is stored. So I hate to continue to harp on data privacy, but as far as the biggest issue, I think for next session for education for me is ensuring that our children's mental health is protected, that this type of software is utilized, but in a responsible and consented way, not in a way that can be grabbed on through a Freedom of Information Act request or anything along those lines. So there are real issues in education that are coming down the pike because of technology that's what I'm focusing on.
He's very consistent. I appreciate that. So Senator Kurt stole a couple of my talking points. Got it written down here as far as the tax cuts that were passed. They will. They already have impacted our education budget for this year. They've lowered that by $139.8 million. And I mean, what that means is that we've just talked about how we passed the largest education budget in the history of our state. We're also educating the largest number of students in the history of our state. And there's a real cost to that. Regionally, we are $2.1 billion with a B below what other states in our region are funding their per pupil average rate. So wrap your mind around how insufficient the funding is. Even though we're excited that we did pass an incredible budget this year and we did see an increase in funding to education, it is not anywhere near what our kids require in order to be not only nationally competitive but globally competitive. There's a real cost to educating every student. And my frustration with the reforms that were introduced this year continue to mask the severity of the problem. When we expand our voucher program to private entities with our public funds, we are continuing to siphon away those needed resources that our students who are choosing to be in our public school system desperately need. And that is a severe cost for each one of you as business owners who are looking to hire the next generation in our workforce. I think we can look at what's happening right now with the availability of workers and getting folks back to work and know that we are headed for a real troubling situation if we can't get honest about what does it mean to provide every child with an appropriate education. And there's a cost to that, so we've got to be honest about what that is. And as you've heard them say, we've lowered classroom sizes. Well, I just pulled up the numbers because there were 3,800 in retirements this year. So that was that number I mentioned earlier. We graduated 800. Every university in our state, the total number of teachers that we would have eligible to hire if they all accepted a contract to teach in the state of Oklahoma, which they are not, wouldn't even come close to meeting just a basic base level, like just replenish the ones that retired. So there are some significant issues that we have got to start talking about in a very sincere way instead of just patting ourselves on the back for the bare minimum of what our students require to be successful.
So on the factors hitting education, I just want to make sure, so we are talking about the right numbers. Not one penny has been taken out of the 1017 fund for this year's budget, not one penny. The numbers you were given are assuming when the tax cuts go in, it makes the assumption next year that additional money was not put in. So while we're on the same page, not one dime left the 1017 fund coming into next year. Additionally, you have to take into account the $50 million put in Redbud, which for the first time in the history of the state of Oklahoma, we funded a fund that was constitutionally created over 100 years to help our poorest schools. Absolutely. One of the things that I think makes me unique in the legislature, and not unique, there are other people that fall on this side. There are, but oftentimes members tend to fall on kind of the school choice side or education needs more money side. I fall on the it can be both side. I have a very student-centric education philosophy. I think we did some phenomenal things for students last year. Open transfer is absolutely phenomenal. Where you are born should not determine the quality of education you get. I think it was a phenomenal. I think the Equal Opportunity Tax Credit is going to put millions upon millions of dollars both in and in the public school system. And on top of that, I think we still need to make every public school better. So you can do both. You don't have to pick one or the other, in my opinion. So when we talk about what I think the next issues that are hitting education, you're seeing some respectful disagreement in a respectful way. I love that. That's what's good for this state. That's what's good for us. I think we have to continue to empower parents with continued policies that empower parents, because I believe competition in all things is a good thing. I think that's helpful. I think, number two, we do have to continue this funding. And one of the reasons I like that it's brought up, so it's weird. Yes, I'm going to push back. Not one, again, can't stress it enough, not one penny was taken out of the 1017 fund. Here's why I'm glad that the issue's brought up. Because the good senators and the good representatives, if we don't make sure that's refunded next year, they absolutely should say, hey, by the way, that tax credit took that tax cut. So they're doing their job too. I mean, I think we have that ability. I think we have to continue on this trajectory. During the 5 years I've been floor leader, I would argue have been the greatest 5 years for school choice in the history of the state of Oklahoma. And I don't have to argue. Great thing about numbers is they're the same. They've actually been the best 5 years on a percentage basis for common education funding in the history of the state of Oklahoma. The great news in education, we can do both. We can empower parents, and we can continue down the path that we've been going to increase education funding for all schools and for all students, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Well, I'll take a little different angle, and probably not a very politically correct angle, but it is something that I hear from teachers all the time with regards to recruiting and retaining educators. It is a fact of life that discipline in the classroom is one of the biggest complaints that we get, and I see lots of heads nodding. Teachers who are not able to do their job teaching the whole class because of discipline issues in the classroom. That is a huge issue with teachers wanting to come back and continue to do the job. A lot of that goes to building leadership. I am extremely proud that in Putnam City Schools and in Bethany Schools, there are programs with professional development to address that. So it is not so much in our neighborhoods, although no place is perfect, but I will tell you that a lot of effort is put in with Putnam City Schools, and I know the Putnam City Foundation, Jennifer Seals, they invest a lot in making sure there are support systems for that. But in our whole state, leadership in the building that supports the teacher when the teacher makes the decision is a problem. To the extent that Joy Hoffmeister, the superintendent of education, literally has reached out and they're developing a program and has just gotten started to train principals on how to lead. A building can have the greatest teachers in the world, and they're going to get discouraged if they don't have good leadership. That is just what it boils down to. That's the nuts and bolts of it. And like I said, it's not politically correct, and it's not pleasant to talk about. But that is what we're dealing with. It is being addressed. It's got to be addressed with great intent and focus if we want to see a turnaround and have one of those key pieces that is going to provide the solution to what is not only a statewide problem, but a nationwide problem with regards to recruiting teachers into the profession. They are professionals. They need to be treated as such, and that means that their employer, that building leader, has got to support them so they can maintain the discipline and the control in that classroom so they can do the job that we as taxpayers have hired them to do.
I think kind of like my biggest interaction with the school system is that has really helped me in wrapping my head around this conversation, because it was a really big one when I first hopped in that I didn't realize goes so deep in Oklahoma. But while I was working with the ACLU of Oklahoma, schools would have me come out and talk to their Generation Citizen courses, right, or their civics courses about issues that they cared about, right? They would give me a topic, and we would talk about that. And overwhelmingly, the conversations that we had were children wanting to know how to protect themselves and their family members. When it came to de-escalation tactics, right, what are the things that we need to know when we come into contact with school resource officers, right, when we come into contact with just law enforcement officers, and that aspect, right? So the conversations really kind of started about what is it, like what policies do we put in place? What are the trainings? What are those initiatives that we need when we're talking with our school resource officers about how we interact with children and how we make it an equitable place where school resource officers and students can exist in a respectful manner, right? In a way that isn't just here as a way to reprimand students when they are acting out, right? Because a lot of the times in that public education system, students are probably acting out because their needs aren't being met at home for some reason, right? Growing up as a child in a single-parent household in Oklahoma's public education system, that was often what I saw and what happened, right? If I was having a bad day at school, it was probably because something was either going on with my father and DOC, right, or my mother who was working 3 jobs to be able to take care of us. And so really understanding how if we are going to keep school resource officers intact in our public education system, understanding how they can meet the needs of the children rather than saying like, okay, you did something horrible, we are going to reprimand you, right? And really meeting that with okay, these things are happening, right? What is the missing part, right? What's making you act out? How do we make sure that we're truly caring for students, right? And that was something that we really kind of saw grow because I don't think the pandemic brought any new issues, but really shined a bright light on the things that children in our public education system, right, face every single day. And so when students had to go home, and then folks realized that a lot of students, that's the only meals that they get a day, right? When we had to figure out how we were going to feed our children, right? When we realized that so many students don't have access to internet at home, how do we make sure that they have access? We had students sitting outside of Starbucks in the district, right, outside of Taco Bell's in the district, to make sure that they could get their lessons done, right? And so that is what that was the conversation, and that's the deep dive that I really kind of jumped in on when it came to helping our education system and helping our children and our families who are trying to navigate it in the midst of a global pandemic that keeps morphing, right, that we can't really keep up with. So I don't know. I guess that was kind of the lens that I saw, and those are the things that really kind of tug at my heart when I talk to the students that are in our charter schools, the students that are in our public schools, and what that really kind of looks like for educators, parents, and students in that, right? And making sure we have all of those people at the table when we have that. Because students, just like communities, right, just like everybody else in our community, students are the closest to the problem, right? And oftentimes they do know or have some inkling about what that solution is. And so making sure we're really listening to what they're saying, right, and helping them really kind of find their voice when they don't. So, yeah.
Well, I guess you're down at the end of the row here. There's not a whole lot left. However, coming from the business world, like most of you all, we want to hire the best and brightest. And how do we make those kids the best and brightest, and how do we keep them here in the state? So we need to make sure that it's not so much how much money we spend per pupil, but how do we spend that money on the pupil. So we need to make sure that the schools are running efficiently and we're getting the most education for the dollar that we're spending, because you can throw more money at a situation and it doesn't really help it. So we just need to make sure that we're spending the money wisely, and that we figure out ways to keep the kids here and get them into higher ed, and then make them out available to the workforce, and keep them here so that our Oklahoma values and our Oklahoma ways of life stay here. And I just feel that kids basically learn better in the classroom. However, I do believe that it's up to the parents to make that end determination, and we need to figure out a way that we can do both, especially with the Delta variant still looming. We have to prepare for all. So we need to make sure that we do have good in class and we do have good online learning as well.
All right, I promised we'd get this out on time, okay? Let me say one thing before we break up today. So one of the biggest over the years, John, it's 15 years I've been doing your roll counts, 15 years in a month. And so one of the most common things we hear is people send me notes and they'll go, well, them people only work 4 months out of the year. They don't. They work 12 and sometimes 13. So I got to tell you, it's my claim to fame. My dad is the last Democrat A&B chief in Oklahoma. That's how long it's been, right? They ran a barbershop. He still cuts hair, by the way. And so it was amazing to see how much time and effort was expended by him on constituent work. He just took care of people down there, okay? And we heard that all the time, part-time job. Well, it's a full-time job, and sometimes you can work other things into it. And so on a day like today, to take 2 hours out of your schedules, thank you all for that, number one. Number two, I want to recommend some summer reading. Commonplace books and Full Circle for Colin's book. And I got one more book for the rest of the summer. If you have not read Oklahoma Pride by Dean Gary Raskob, the Hudson College of Public Health, and Gene Rainbolt about public health in Oklahoma, which is more than just outcomes in school. It has to do with income inequality, health care, all of these things in terms of, I should say, health care outcomes have a lot more to do than just a test, okay? There's a lot that goes into it, and we are facing, as we do every Friday when we tape, we go, well, what are we finishing last in this week? And occasionally John will go, we're not at the bottom anymore. When we're talking about incarceration, it was one of the big things in Oklahoma was when 780 passed and some of the ensuing legislation there. So these folks work very, very hard. They've taken time out today. I know you appreciate it. I think, listen, there's so many nonprofits in the room. Hats off, God bless what you do. It's been a rough 15, 16 months for nonprofits. It's unbelievable. Thank you for what you do. Jill, where are you at? Thank you for what you do. And our members of the delegation, thank you for what you do. Do you have any closing, anything, sir? It's all yours.
Well, I suppose we can thank Scott Mitchell. How about that? I'm going to steal this book. Thanks, Colin. We did video this, as you can tell from the cameras in the back, and we'll get that on the web. I hope that I see everybody at our community coffee next Thursday. That's going to be at Dale Rogers Training Center. We talk about community and helping people. It's one of the coolest places, and their mission is pretty awesome as well. September 30th, we're looking to have an education summit, and we're going to bring some people in, and we're going to go deep dive in a room kind of like this, and we're going to talk about those things. I want to thank all of our legislators for coming, even the ones who go, oh, man, it's Lawrence. But thanks, everybody, and have a good day.